The video is very good, and there is much to learn. You may actually want to have a little pad or something with you, because you're going to hear a bunch of tips and things that are just absolutely amazing. Something simple like, when should you eat? If you're going to eat an apple, when should you eat it? Because when you eat it may indeed impact the amount of calories that you take in at that moment in time. At the end of the video, Michael Greger will join us, and he will be live, and you all have sent in a bunch of questions which Judy Cody will be sharing with Michael Greger, and you're going to want to hear both the questions and obviously the answers. So with no further ado, let's get this show started.
Surely if there was some safe, simple, free solution to the obesity epidemic, we would know about it by now, right? I'm not so sure. It may take up to 17 years before research findings make it into day-to-day clinical practice. To take one example that was particularly poignant for my family, heart disease. You know, decades ago, Dr. Dean Ornish and colleagues published evidence in one of the most prestigious medical journals in the world that our leading cause of death could be reversed with diet and lifestyle changes alone, yet hardly anything changed. Even now, hundreds of thousands of Americans continue to needlessly die from what we learned decades ago was a reversible disease. In fact, I had seen it with my own eyes. My grandmother was cured of her end-stage heart disease by one of Dean's predecessors, Nathan Pritikin, using similar methods. So if effectively the cure to our #1 killer of men and women could get lost down some rabbit hole and ignored, what else might there be in the medical literature that could help my patients, but just didn't have a corporate budget driving its promotion? Well, I made it my life's mission to find out. That's why I became a doctor in the first place and why I started my nonprofit site, nutritionfacts.org. Everything on the website is free. There are no ads, no corporate sponsorships, strictly non-commercial, not selling anything, just put it up as a public service, as a labor of love, as a tribute to my grandmother. New videos and articles nearly every day on the latest in evidence-based nutrition. What a concept. Okay, so what does the science show is the best way to lose weight? If you want testimonials and before and after pictures, you have come to the wrong place. I'm not interested in anecdotes. I'm interested in the evidence. When it comes to making decisions as life and death important as the health and well-being of yourself and your family, there's really only one question. What does the best available balance of evidence show right now? The problem is that even just sticking to the peer-reviewed medical literature is not enough, as false and scientifically misleading, unsupported beliefs about obesity are pervasive, even in scientific journals. The only way to get at the truth, though, then, is to dive deep into the primary literature and read all the original studies themselves, but who's got time for that? There are more than 500,000 scientific papers on obesity, with 100 new ones published every day. Even researchers in the field might not be able to keep track beyond their narrow domain. But that's what we do at nutritionfacts.org. We comb through tens of thousands of studies a year, so you don't have to. Very nice. And indeed, we uncovered a treasure trove of buried data. Like today, I'll cover simple spices. For example, proven in randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled trials to accelerate weight loss for pennies a day. But with so little profit potential, it's no wonder these studies never saw the light of day. The only profiting I care about, though, is your health. That's why 100% of all the proceeds I receive from all my books and DVDs and speaking engagements are all donated to charity. I just want to do for your family what Pritikin did for my family. But wait, isn't weight loss just about eating less and moving more? I mean, isn't a calorie a calorie? That's what the food industry wants you to think. The notion that a calorie from one source is just as fattening as any other is a trope broadcast by the food industry as a way to absolve itself of culpability. Coca-Cola itself even put an ad out there emphasizing this one simple common sense fact. As the current and past chairs of the Harvard's nutrition department put it, this central argument from industry is that the overconsumption of calories from carrots would be no different than the overconsumption of calories from soda. If a calorie is just a calorie, why does it matter what we put in our mouths? Well, let's explore that example of carrots versus Coca-Cola. It's true that in a tightly controlled laboratory setting, 240 calories of carrots, 10 carrots, would have the same effect on calorie balance than the 240 calories in a bottle of Coke. But this comparison falls flat on its face out in the real world. Right? You could chug those liquid candy calories in less than a minute, but eating 240 calories of carrots would take you more than 2.5 hours of sustained, constant chewing. Not only would your jaw get sore, but 240 calories of carrots is like 5 cups. You might not even be able to fit them all in. Right? Our stomach is only so big. Once we fill it up, stretch receptors in our stomach wall tell us when we've had enough. But different foods have different amounts of calories per stomachful, right? Some foods have more calories per cup, per pound, per mouthful than others. This is the concept of calorie density, right? The number of calories in a given amount of food. 3 pounds is about what the average American eats in a day. As you can see, for example, oil is a high calorie density, meaning a high calorie concentration, lots of calories, kind of packed into a small space. So drizzling just a tablespoon of oil onto a dish adds over 100 calories. For those same calories, you could have instead eaten about 2 cups of blackberries, for example, a food with a low calorie density. So these 2 meals have the same number of calories. You could swig down that spoonful of oil, not even feel anything in your stomach, but eating a couple cups of berries could start to fill you up. That's why, yes, biochemically, a calorie is a calorie, but eating the same amount of calories in different foods can have different effects. The average human stomach can expand to fit about 4 cups of food. So a single stomach full of strawberry ice cream, for example, could max out our caloric intake for the entire day. For those same 2,000 calories, to get those same 2,000 calories from strawberries themselves, you'd have to eat 44 cups of berries, right? That's 11 stomachfuls. I mean, as delicious as berries are, I don't know if I could fill my stomach to bursting 11 times a day, right? So some foods are just impossible to overeat. They're so low in calorie density, right? You just physically couldn't eat enough to even maintain your weight. In a lab, a calorie is a calorie, but in life, far from it. Traditional weight loss diets focus on decreasing portion size, but these, we know these eat less approaches can leave people feeling hungry and unsatisfied. A more effective approach may be to shift the emphasis from restriction to positive eat more messaging of increasing intake of healthy, low-calorie density foods. But you don't know until you put it to the test. Very nice. Researchers in Hawaii tried putting people on more of a traditional Hawaiian diet with all the plant foods they could eat. Unlimited quantities of fruits, vegetables, whole grains, beans, and the study subjects lost an average of 17 pounds in just 21 days. calorie intake dropped by 40%, but not because they were eating less food. They lost 17 pounds in 3 weeks eating more food, in excess of 4 pounds a day. How could that be? Because whole plant foods tend to be so calorically dilute, right? You can stuff yourself without getting the same kind of weight gain. They lost 17 pounds in 3 weeks eating more food. That's why in my upcoming new book, How Not to Diet, which I am very excited about, that's why low in calorie density is on my list of the 17 ingredients for an ideal weight loss diet. As noted before, Americans appear to average about 3 pounds of food a day. So if you stuck with mostly these foods, right, you can see how you can eat more food and still shed pounds. A landmark study set to be published next month found that even when presented with the same number of calories and the same salt, sugar, fat, fiber, and protein, processed foods led to weight gain, 2 pounds gained over 2 weeks, and unprocessed foods led to weight loss, 2 pounds down in the same 2 weeks. Here's one of their processed food meals, which is probably healthier, actually, than what most people eat. Non-fat Greek yogurt, baked potato chips, sugar-free diet lemonade with a turkey sandwich has the same number of calories as this, with the unprocessed meal food folks were eating, kind of a Southwest entree salad, black beans, avocados, nuts. That's the calorie density effect. Same calories, but there's just more food. No wonder it satisfied their hunger, and they ended up 4 pounds lighter in 2 weeks eating more food. So how can you decrease the calorie density of your diet? Well, just a quick peek at the two extremes should suggest two methods. Abandon added fats and add abandoned vegetables. Method number one, covertly put people on a relatively low-fat diet. They tend to lose body fat every day, even though they can eat as much as they want. But if you instead give those same people the same meals, but this time sneak in enough extra fats and oils to change it to a high-fat diet, they gain body fat every day. In fact, in a famous prison experiment in Vermont, lean inmates were overfed up to 10,000 calories a day to try to experimentally make them fat. This turned out to be surprisingly difficult. Most started dreading breakfast and involuntarily threw it up. The researchers learned how difficult it was to have people gain weight on purpose unless you feed them lots of fat. To get prisoners to gain 30 pounds on a regular diet, it took about 140,000 excess calories per a certain amount of body surface area. To get the same 30-pound weight gain just by adding fat to their diets, all they had to do was feed them about an extra 40,000 extra calories. When the extra calories were in the form of straight fat, it took as many as 100,000 fewer calories to gain the same amount of weight. A calorie is not a calorie. It depends on what you eat. In this case, lowering fat content effectively made up to 100,000 calories disappear. That's why low in added fat is on my list of ideal weight loss ingredients as well. There are, however, two important exceptions. Processed foods with reduced fat claims are often so packed with sugar that they can have the same number of calories as a higher fat product. Right? Snackwell's fat-free cookies, for example, at 1,700 calories per pound, are as calorie dense as a cheese Danish. The other exception to the low-fat rule is that vegetables are so calorically dilute that even a high-fat veggie dish, like some oily broccoli with garlic sauce or something, tends to be less calorie dense overall, which brings us to the second strategy for lowering calorie density. Instead of sneaking out fat, sneak in vegetables. The biggest influence on calorie density is not fat, but water content. Since water adds weight and bulk without adding calories, the most calorie-dense foods and the most calorie-dense diets tend to be those that are dry. Some vegetables, on the other hand, are more than 95% water. And not just, iceberg lettuce. Cucumbers, celery, turnips, cooked Napa cabbage, bok choy, summer squash, zucchini, bean sprouts, and bamboo shoots can top out at 95% water. They're basically just water in vegetable form, right? A big bowl of water-rich vegetables is practically just a big bowl of trapped water. Right? The effect on calorie density is so dramatic the food industry wants in on the action. They figure they could use nanotechnology to structure a solid processed food similar to a celery stalk with self-assembled water-filled nanocells or nanotubes. No need, as Mother Nature beat you to it. When dozens of foods, common foods, pitted head-to-head for their ability to satiate appetites for hours, the characteristic most predictive was not how little fat or how much protein it had, but how much water it had. That was the number one predictor of how filling a food is. That's why high in water-rich foods is on my list too. Water-rich foods like vegetables topping the charts, with most more than 90% water by weight, followed by most fresh fruit, coming in around the 80s. Starchier vegetables, whole grains, and canned beans are mostly 70s, meaning 3/4 of their weight, pure water. In general, when it comes to water-rich foods, most whole plant foods float towards the top, most animal foods fall somewhere in the middle, and most processed foods sink to the bottom. In a famous series of experiments, researchers at Penn State decided to put water-rich vegetables to the test. Study subjects were served pasta and told to eat as much or as little as they'd like, and on average they consumed about 900 calories of pasta. Now, what do you think would happen if as a first course you gave them 100 calories of salad, composed largely of lettuce, carrots, cucumber, celery, and cherry tomatoes? Would they go on to eat the same amount of pasta and end up with a 1,000-calorie lunch, 900 plus 100? Or would they eat maybe 100 fewer calories of pasta, effectively canceling out the added salad calories? It was even better than that. They ate more than 200 fewer calories of pasta. Thanks to the salad, 100 calories in, 200 calories out. Right? So in essence, the salad had negative 100 calories. Preloading with vegetables can effectively subtract 100 calories out of a meal. Right? That's how you can lose weight, by eating more food. Of course, the type of salad matters. The researchers repeated the experiment, this time added a fatty dressing, extra shredded cheese, which quadrupled the salad's calorie density. Now, eating this salad as a first course didn't turn a 900-calorie meal into one with less than 800 calories. Instead, it turned it into a meal with calories in the quadruple digits, right? It's like, preloading pizza with garlic bread, right? You can end up with more calories overall. Okay, so what's the cutoff? Studies on preloading show that eating about a cup of food before a meal decreases subsequent intake by about 100 calories. So to get a negative calorie effect, the first course would have to contain fewer than 100 calories per cup. Right? As you can see in the chart, this includes most fresh fruit and vegetables, but having something like a dinner roll would not work. But hey, give people a large apple to eat before that same pasta meal, and rather than consuming 200 calories less, it was more like 300 calories less. So, how many calories does an apple have? It depends on when you eat it. Before a meal, an apple could effectively have about negative 200 calories. You can see the same thing giving people vegetable soup as a first course. Hundreds of calories disappear. One study tracked people's intake throughout the day, even found that overweight subjects randomized to pre-lunch vegetable soup not only ate less lunch, but deducted an extra bonus 100 calories at dinner too, a whole 7 hours later, right? So the next time you sit down to a healthy soup, you can imagine calories being veritably sucked out of your body with every spoonful. Even just drinking 2 cups of water before a meal immediately caused people to cut about 20% of calories out of the meal, taking in more than 100 fewer calories. No wonder overweight men and women randomized to 2 cups of water before each meal lost weight 44% faster. 2 cups of water before each meal, 44% faster weight loss. That's why so-called negative calorie preloading is on my list of weight loss boosters, which are all the things I could find that can accelerate weight loss kind of regardless of what you eat the rest of the time. Negative calorie preloading just means that, that starting a meal with foods containing less than 100 calories per cup. That can include many fruits, vegetables, soup, salad, or simply a tall glass of water. Anything we can put on that first course salad to boost weight loss even further? Well, in my Amping AMPK section, I talk about ways to activate an enzyme known as the fat controller. Its discovery is considered one of the most important medical breakthroughs in the last few decades. You can activate this enzyme through exercise, fasting, and nicotine, but is there any way to boost it for weight loss without sweat, hunger, or the whole dying a horrible death from lung cancer kind of thing? Well, Big Pharma is all over it. After all, obese individuals may be unwilling to perform even a minimum of physical activity, wrote a group of pharmacologists, thus indicating that drugs mimicking endurance exercise are highly desirable. So, it's crucial that oral compounds with high bioavailability are developed to safely induce chronic AMPK activation for long-term weight loss and maintenance. But there's no need to develop such a compound since you can already buy it at any grocery store. It's called vinegar. When vinegar, acetic acid, is absorbed and metabolized, you get a natural AMPK boost. Enough of a boost to lose weight at a typical dose you might use dressing a salad? Well, I mean, vinegar has evidently been used to treat obesity for centuries, but only recently has it been put to the test. Randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled trial on the effects of vinegar intake on the reduction of body fat in overweight men and women. The subjects were randomized to drink a daily beverage containing 1 or 2 glasses, 1 or 2 tablespoons of apple cider vinegar, or a control drink, a beverage that developed to taste the same but as the vinegar drink, but prepared with a different kind of acid, so it didn't have any actual vinegar in it. 3 months in, the fake vinegar group actually gained weight, as overweight people tend to do, whereas the genuine vinegar groups significantly lost body fat, as determined by CT scan. A little vinegar every day led to pounds of weight loss achieved for just pennies a day without removing anything from their diet. That's why one of my 21 tweaks to accelerate weight loss is 2 teaspoons of vinegar with each meal, either sprinkled on your salad or even just added to tea with some lemon juice or something. The beauty of the vinegar studies is that they're not just randomized controlled trials, but placebo-controlled trials. I mean, some studies aren't controlled at all. Women asked to eat a ripe tomato before lunch every day for a month, lost about 2 pounds, but without a control group, you don't know if the tomato had anything to do with it. Just being enrolled in a weight loss study where you know they're going to come back and weigh you in a month can have people change their diets in other ways. Right? I mean, it's certainly possible. I mean, tomato is 95% water, so you'd be filling up a fist-sized portion of your stomach with only about 15 calories before a meal. So, I mean, it's certainly possible, but we need a better study to prove it for weight loss. Stronger studies have control groups, at least. For example, randomize people to a weight loss diet with or without 1 to 2 cups of low-sodium vegetable juice, and those drinking the vegetable juice lose significantly more weight. Or split people into 2 groups and give half about 2 tablespoons of goji berries a day, and 45 days later the goji group appeared to cut 2.5 inches off their waistline compared to no change in the control group. But anytime you have one group do something special, you don't know how much of the benefit is due to the placebo effect. In drug trials, it's easy, right? You give people, half the people the actual medication, the other half a placebo, identical-looking sugar pill placebo. Both groups are then doing the same thing, taking an identical-looking pill. So if you see any difference in outcomes, all right, well then we can suspect it's due to the actual drug, right? But what would placebo? Broccoli, look like, right? That's the problem. You can't stuff cabbage into a capsule, but there are some foods so potent that you could actually fit them into a pill to pit them against placebos. Spices. Want to know if garlic can cause weight loss? Give people some garlic powder compressed into tablets versus placebo pills. And garlic worked, resulting in both a drop in weight and waistlines within 6 weeks. They used about a half teaspoon of garlic powder a day, which would cost less than 4 cents. 4 cents too steep. How about 2 cents a day? A quarter teaspoon of garlic powder a day. About 100 overweight men and women randomized a quarter teaspoon worth of garlic powder a day or placebo, and those unknowingly taking that 2 cents worth of garlic powder a day lost about 6 pounds of straight body fat over the next 15 weeks. Now, if you can splurge up to 3 cents a day, there's black cumin, a meta-analysis of randomized controlled trials shows weight loss efficacy, again, with just a quarter teaspoon a day. Not regular cumin. This is a completely different spice known as black cumin. You say, what is black cumin? You obviously haven't been reading your Bibles. Described as a miracle herb, besides the weight loss, there are randomized controlled trials showing daily black cumin consumption significantly improves cholesterol and triglycerides, significantly improves blood pressure and blood sugar control. But I use it just because it tastes good. I just put black cumin seeds in a pepper grinder, grind it like pepper. With more than 1,000 papers published in the medical literature on black cumin, some reporting extraordinary results like dropping cholesterol levels as much as a statin drug. Why don't we hear more about it? Why weren't we taught about it in medical school? Right? Presumably because there's no profit motive, right? Black cumin is just a common natural spice, right? You're not going to thrill your stockholders selling something that you can't patent that costs 3 cents a day. Or you can use regular cumin, the second most common popular spice on earth. Those randomized a half of a teaspoon at both lunch and dinner over 3 months, lost 4 more pounds and an extra inch off their waist, found comparable to the obesity drug known as Orlistat. That's the anal leakage drug you may have heard about. Though the drug company evidently prefers the term fecal spotting to describe the rectal discharge it causes. The drug company's website offered some helpful tips, though. It's probably a smart idea to wear dark pants and bring a change of clothes with you to work. You know, just in case your drug causes you to crap your pants at work. I think I'll stick with the cumin. Cayenne pepper can counteract the metabolic slowing that accompanies weight loss and accelerate fat burning as a bonus. Ginger powder, over 12 randomized controlled trials starting at just a quarter teaspoon of ground ginger a day, showing significantly decreased body weight at just pennies a day, proven in placebo-controlled trials to work, but you probably never heard about any of this because they can't make enough profit. Don't get me started. Let me go back to the Coke versus carrots example. A calorie is not a calorie because drinking this is not the same as eating this. But even if you consume the same number of calories, chewed for hours to pack in all those carrots, a calorie may still not be a calorie because it's not what you eat, it's what you absorb. And as anyone who's ever eaten corn can tell you, some bits of vegetable matter can pass right through you. A calorie may still be a calorie circling your toilet bowl, but flesh calories aren't going to make it onto your hips. Right? That's where fiber comes in. If you bump people's fiber intake up, even to just the recommended minimum daily intake, they start losing weight. because they experience about a 10% drop in daily caloric intake. Why should more fiber mean fewer calories? Well, of course, first it adds bulk without adding calories. Cold-pressed apple juice, for example, is basically just apples minus fiber, and you could chug that, chug a bottle of juice in a couple of seconds. But, to get the same number of calories, you would have to eat about 5 cups of apple slices, and that's the difference fiber can make. But it's not just a calorie density thing. Imagine what happens next, right? The apple juice would get rapidly absorbed as soon as it's spilled out of your stomach into your gut, right? Spike your blood sugars, whereas the sugar trapped in the mass of chewed apple slices would be absorbed more slowly along the length of your intestines, right? Nutrients can only be absorbed when they physically come in contact with the side of your intestine, with your gut wall, right? Now, fiber never gets absorbed, right? So it can act as a carrier to dilute or even eliminate calories out the other end. And fiber doesn't just trap sugars, it acts as a fat and starch blocker too. Those on the standard American diet lose about 5% of their calories through their waste every day. But on a higher fiber diet, we double that. It's not what you eat, but what you absorb. So you can lose weight on a high-fiber diet eating the exact same number of calories simply because some of those calories get trapped, get flushed down the toilet, and never make it into our system. And it's not just the calories in the high-fiber foods themselves that are less available. High-fiber foods trap calories across the board, right? So eat a Twinkie on a high-fiber diet and you absorb fewer Twinkie calories. It's like every calorie label you look at gets instantly discounted when you're eating lots of fiber-rich foods, which is why it makes it onto my list. My section on other fat-blocking foods starts out with a command to eat your thylakoids, doctor's orders. What on earth is a thylakoid? Just the source of nearly all known life and the oxygen we breathe. No biggie. Thylakoids are where photosynthesis takes place, the process by which plants turn light into food. Thylakoids are the great green engine of life, microscopic sac-like structures composed of chlorophyll-rich membranes concentrated in the leaves of plants. When we eat thylakoids, when we bite into a leaf of spinach or something, those green leaf membranes don't immediately get digested. They last for hours in our intestines, and that's when they work their magic. Thylakoid membranes bind to lipase. Lipase is the enzyme in our body that our body uses to digest fat. So if you bind the enzyme, you slow fat absorption. But if all the fat is eventually absorbed, what's the benefit? Location, location, location. There's a phenomenon known as the ileal break. The ileum is the last part of the small intestine before it dumps into your colon. And when undigested calories are detected that far down in your intestines, your body thinks, oh, I must be full from stem to stern, and puts the brakes on eating more by dialing down your appetite. This can be shown experimentally. You insert a 9-foot tube down people's throats and drip in any calories, fat, sugar, protein, and you can activate the ileal brake. So then you sit them down to an all-you-can-eat meal, and compared to the placebo group, who had just gotten a squirt of water down the tube, people eat about 100 calories less, right? You just don't feel as hungry. You feel just as full, eating significantly less. That's the ileal brake in action. This can then translate into weight loss. Randomize overweight women on a diet to green plant membranes, in other words, just covertly slip them some powdered spinach, and they get a boost in appetite-suppressing hormones, a decreased urge for sweets. Yes, indeed, spinach can cut your urge for chocolate. And boom, accelerated weight loss, all thanks to eating green. The actual green itself, the chlorophyll-packed membranes in the leaves. Now, the researchers use spinach powder just so they can create convincing placebos, but you can get just as many thylakoids eating about a half a cup of cooked greens, which is what I recommend people eat 2 times a day in my daily dozen checklist of all the healthiest of healthy things I encourage people to fit into their daily routine. In the Journal of the Society of Chemical Industry, a group of food technologists argue that given their fat-blocking benefits, thylakoid membranes could be incorporated into functional foods as a new promising appetite-reducing ingredient, or you can just get them the way Mother Nature intended. Which greens have the most? You can tell just by looking at them. Because thylakoids are where the chlorophyll is, the greener the leaves, the more potent the effect. So go for the greenest green greens, the darkest green greens you can find. Where I shop, that's the lacinato, aka dinosaur kale. Now, if you overcook greens too long, right, you know how they turn that drab olive brown? That's the thylakoids physically degrading. But blanched for 15 seconds or so in steaming or boiling water, you know how greens can get even brighter green? That actually translates into a boost in the fat-blocking ability. So you can gauge thylakoid activity in the grocery store, in your kitchen with your own two eyes by going for the green. Though thylakoids eventually get broken down, fiber makes it all the way down to our colon. Well, it's technically true that we can't digest fiber. That's only applicable to the part of us that's actually human. Most of the cells in our body are bacteria, or gut flora, which weigh as much as one of our kidneys, as metabolically active as our liver, has been called our forgotten organ. And it's an organ that runs on MAC, microbiota accessible carbohydrates. So when you see me write, eat lots of Big Macs, I don't want anyone to get the wrong idea. MAC is just another name for prebiotics, right? What our good gut flora eat. In other words, fiber. There's that fiber again. What do our good bacteria do with the fiber? We feed them and they feed us right back. They make short-chain fatty acids that get absorbed from the colon into our bloodstream, circulate through our body, and even make it up into our brain. Right? It's like the way our gut flora communicates with us, dialing down our appetite, all the while increasing the rate at which we burn fat and boosting our metabolism at the same time, all thanks to fiber. Check this out. Put people on a brain scanner, show them a high-calorie food like a donut, and the reward centers in their brains instantly light up. But if you repeat the experiment, but this time secretly deliver fiber-derived short-chain fatty acids directly into their colon, you get a blunted reward center response. And subjects report that high-calorie foods just seem less appetizing, and subsequently ate less of an all-you-can-eat meal. But fiber supplements like Metamucil don't work, which makes sense because they're non-fermentable, meaning our gut bacteria can't eat them. So yeah, they can improve bowel regularity, but can't be used by our good bacteria to make those compounds that can block our cravings. For that, we have to actually eat real food. Our good gut bugs are trying to help us, right? But when we eat a diet deficient in fiber, we are in effect starving our microbial self. Less than 5% of Americans reach even the recommended minimum daily adequate intake of fiber. No surprise, since the number one sources are beans and whole grains. And 96% of Americans don't even reach the recommended minimum intake of legumes, which are beans, split peas, chickpeas, and lentils, and 99% don't reach the recommended minimum for whole grains. Most people don't even know what fiber is. More than half of Americans surveyed think that steak is a significant source of fiber. However, by definition, fiber is only found in plants. There's zero fiber in meat, eggs, or dairy, and typically little or no fiber in processed junk, and therein lies the problem. But, wouldn't at least the protein in that steak fill you up? Surprisingly, even a review supported by the meat, dairy, and egg industries acknowledged that protein intake does not actually translate into eating less later on, whereas you eat a fiber-rich whole grain for supper, And it can cut your calorie intake more than 12 hours later at lunch the next day. You feel full 100 calories quicker the following day because by then, your good gut bugs are feasting on the same bounty and dialing down your appetite. Today, even our meat could be considered junk food. For more than a century, one of the great goals of animal agriculture has been to increase the carcass fat content of farm animals. Take chicken, for example. 100 years ago, the USDA determined chicken was about 23% protein by weight and less than 2% fat. Today, chickens have been genetically manipulated through selective breeding to have about 10 times more fat. Chicken Little has become Chicken Big, and maybe making us bigger too. Meat consumption in general is associated with weight gain, but poultry appeared to be the worst. Even just an ounce a day, which is like a single chicken nugget, or like one chicken breast every 10 days, was associated with weight gain compared to eating no chicken at all. It's funny, when the meat industry funds obesity studies on chicken, they choose for their head-to-head comparison foods like cookies and sugar-coated chocolates. This is a classic drug industry trick to try to make your product look better by comparing it to something worse. Apparently, just regular chocolate wasn't enough to make chicken look better. But what happens when chicken is pitted against a real control, like chicken without the actual chicken? Chickens out. Both soy-based proteins and corn, which is a plant-based meat made from the mushroom kingdom, were found to have stronger satiating qualities than chicken. Feed people a chicken and rice lunch, and 4.5 hours later, they'd eat 18% more of a dinner buffet than had they instead been given a chicken-free chicken and rice lunch. These findings are consistent with childhood obesity research that found that meat consumption seemed to double the odds of school children becoming overweight compared to the consumption of plant-based meat products. Whole food sources of plant protein, such as beans, did even better, though, associated with cutting in half the odds of becoming overweight. So that's why I consider these kinds of plant-based meats more of a useful stepping stone towards a healthier diet rather than the kind of end game goal ideal. Part of the reason plant-based meats may be less fattening is they cause less of an insulin spike. A meat-free chicken like corn causes up to 41% less of an immediate insulin reaction. It turns out animal protein causes almost exactly as much insulin release as pure sugar. Just adding some egg whites to your diet can increase insulin output as much as 60% within 4 days. And fish may be even worse. Why would adding tuna to mashed potatoes spike up insulin levels, but adding broccoli instead cut the insulin response by about 40%? It's not the fiber, since giving the same amount of broccoli fiber alone provided no significant benefit. So why does animal protein make things worse, but plant protein make things better? Plant proteins tend to be lower in the branched chain amino acids, which are associated with insulin resistance, the cause of type 2 diabetes. You can show this experimentally. Give some vegans branched chain amino acids, you can make them as insulin resistant as omnivores, or take some omnivores and put them even through a 48-hour vegan diet challenge, and within 2 days, you can see the opposite, significant improvements in metabolic health. Why? Because decreased consumption of branched chain amino acids improves metabolic health. Check this out. Those randomized to restrict their protein intake were averaging literally hundreds more calories a day, so they should have become fatter, right? But no, they actually lost more body fat. Restricting their protein enabled them to eat more calories, while at the same time they lost more weight, more calories, yet a loss in body fat. And this magic protein restriction, they were just having people eat the recommended amount of protein. So maybe they should have just called this group the normal protein group or the recommended protein group, and the group that was eating more typical American protein levels and suffering because of it, the excess protein group. Given the metabolic harms of excess branched-chain amino acid exposure, leaders in the field have suggested the invention of drugs to block their absorption, to promote metabolic health and treat diabetes and obesity without reducing caloric intake. Or we can just try not to eat so many branched-chain amino acids in the first place. They are found mostly in meat, including chicken and fish, dairy products, and eggs, perhaps explaining why animal protein is associated with higher diabetes risk, whereas plant protein appears protective. So defining the appropriate upper limits of animal protein intake may offer a great chance for the prevention of type 2 diabetes and obesity, but it need not be all or nothing. Even an intermittent vegan diet has been shown to be beneficial. If there was one piece of advice that sums up the recommendations in my upcoming book, it would be wall off your calories. Animal cells are encased only in easily digestible membranes, which allows the enzymes in our gut to effortlessly liberate the calories in a steak, for example. Right? Plant cells, on the other hand, have cell walls that are made out of fiber, which present an indigestible physical barrier, so many of the calories remain trapped. Now, processed plant foods, however, fruit juice, sugar, refined grains, even whole grains, if they've been powdered into flour, have had their cellular structure destroyed. Their cell walls cracked open, and their calories are free for the taking. But when you eat structurally intact plant foods, chew all you want, you're still going to end up with calories completely surrounded by fiber, which then blunts the glycemic impact, activates the ileal brake, and delivers sustenance to your friendly flora. So, bottom line, try to make sure as many of your calories as possible, your protein, your carbs, your fat, are encased in cell walls. In other words, from whole, intact plant foods. That's what nature intended to happen millions of years before we learned how to sharpen spears and mill grains and boil sugar cane. Our entire physiology is presumed to have evolved in the context of eating what the rest of our great ape cousins eat, plants. The Paleolithic period, when we started using tools, only goes back about 2 million years. We and other great apes have been evolving since back in the Miocene era, more like 20 million years ago. So for the first 90% of our hominoid existence, our bodies evolved on mostly plants. It's no wonder then that our bodies may thrive best on the diet we were designed to eat. So maybe we should go back to our roots. With enough portion control, anyone can lose weight, right? Lock someone in a closet, you can force them to lose as much body fat as you want. Chaining someone to a treadmill, probably have a similar effect. But what is the most effective weight loss regimen that doesn't involve calorie restriction or exercise or a felony? I scoured through the medical literature at all the randomized controlled trials, and the single most successful strategy to date is a diet of whole plant foods. The single most effective weight loss intervention like that ever published in peer-reviewed medical literature, a whole food, plant-based diet. That works better than anything else studied to date, and no wonder, given what we just learned about fiber and branched-chain amino acids and all that. Okay. Now, I mean, we've known for more than 40 years that those eating predominantly plant-based diets weigh on average about 30 pounds less than the general population, but you don't know if it's the diet itself until you put it to the test. In 2017, a group of New Zealand researchers published the Broad Study, a 12-week randomized controlled trial in the poorest region of the country with the highest obesity rates. Overweight individuals were randomized to receive either standard medical care or semi-weekly classes offering advice and encouragement to eat a low-fat diet centered around fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and legumes. And that's all it was, just empowerment and information, empowerment with knowledge. No meals were provided. The intervention group was merely informed about the benefits of plant-based living and encouraged to fit it into their own lives at home. No significant change in the control group, but the plant-based intervention group, even though there were no restrictions on portions, be able to eat freely all the healthy foods they wanted, lost an average of 19 pounds by the end of the 3-month study. 19 pounds, that's a kind of respectable weight loss, but what happened next, right? At the end of those 12 weeks, class was dismissed and no more instruction was given. The researchers were curious to see how much weight the subjects had gained back after being released from the study. So everyone was invited back at the 6-month mark to get reweighed. The plant-based group had left the 3-month study 19 pounds lighter on average, but 6 months later, they were only down about 27 pounds. They got better. The plant-based group had been feeling so good, both physically and mentally, had been able to come off so many of their medications. They were sticking to the diet on their own, and the weight continued to come off. What about a year later? Even in studies that last a whole year, where people are coached to stay on a particular diet for the entire year's time, by the end of the year, any initial weight loss typically tends to creep on back. The broad study only lasted 3 months, yet after it was all over, those who had been randomized to the plant-based group not only lost dozens of pounds, but they kept it off. They not only achieved greater weight loss at 6 and 12 months than any other comparable trial. That was months after the study had already ended. Right? A whole food plant-based diet achieved the greatest weight loss ever recorded compared to any other such intervention published in the scientific literature. You can read the record-breaking study yourself for free in full at nature.com/articles/NUTD2173, or you can just point your phone camera up at the screen. Any diet that results in reduced calorie intake can result in weight loss. I mean, dropping pounds isn't so much the issue. The problem is keeping them off, right? And a key difference between plant-based nutrition and more traditional approaches to weight loss is that people are encouraged on plant-based diets to eat ad libitum, meaning as much as you eat, as much as you want. No calorie counting, no portion control, just eating, right? The strategy is to improve the quality of the food rather than restricting the quantity of the food. You put people on a diet packed with fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and beans that allow them to eat as much as they want, they end up eating about 50% fewer calories than they might have otherwise, just as full on half the calories. Wait, how can you keep people satisfied cutting more than 1,000 calories from their daily diet? By eating more high-bulk, low-calorie density foods, vegetables, fruits, whole grains, beans, and fewer calorie-dense foods like, meats, cheeses, sugars, and fats, right? But it may not just be the calories in side of the equation. Those eating more plant-based appear to effectively be burning more calories in their sleep. The resting metabolic rate of those eating more plant-based may be 10% higher or more, a boosted metabolism that can translate into burning off hundreds of extra calories a day more without doing a thing. Eating more plant-based, you burn more calories just existing. So no wonder why those who eat more plant-based tend to be slimmer. Start packing your diet with real foods that grow out of the ground, and the pounds should come off naturally, taking you down towards your ideal weight. Okay, so that's what I spent the first half of the book doing, laying out the optimum weight loss diet. Plant yourself. Then I spend the second half of the book on all the tools I unearthed to drive further weight loss for any stubborn pounds that remain. We already learned that a calorie is not necessarily a calorie. 100 calories of chickpeas, right, has a different impact than 100 calories of chicken or chiclets based on factors like absorption and appetite. But in this second half, I go a step further and explore how even the exact same foods eaten differently can have different effects. even if you eat the same amount, even if you absorb the same amount, a calorie may still not be a calorie. It's not only what we eat, but how and when. Just to give you a taste, the exact same number of calories at breakfast are significantly less fattening than the same number of calories at dinner. What? I mean, that's just mind-blowing, right? Same calories, different weight loss. A diet with a bigger breakfast causes more weight loss than the same diet with a bigger dinner. So my recommendation to stop eating after 7 p.m. is not just because, I'm afraid people are mindlessly snacking on the couch or something. The same snack at night is literally more fattening than eating the exact same snack during the daytime. All thanks to our circadian rhythms, our chronobiology, something I spent a whole chapter about. Some of the sleep data is really crazy too. Overweight adults were randomized to 8 weeks of either a calorie-restricted diet or the same diet combined with 5 days a week of just 1 less hour of sleep a night. Now, they ended up sleeping an hour later on the weekend, so overall just cut 3 hours of sleep out of their week. Now, surely, it's 3 hours a week? Sleep difference is not going to change how much weight they lost, right? And on the scale, that was true. But in the normal sleep group, 80% of the weight loss was fat, whereas in the group missing just a few hours of sleep, it was the opposite, with 80% of the loss being lean body mass, right? So, you snooze, you lose fat. Right? A few hours of missed sleep seemed to totally flip fat loss on its head, but just looking at the scale, you wouldn't know it. It's like when people fast. Stopping eating completely for a week or two can cause more weight loss than just restricting your calories, duh, right? But paradoxically, it may actually lead to less loss of body fat. Wait, how can eating fewer calories lead to less fat loss? Because during fasting, your body starts cannibalizing itself and burning your own protein for fuel. The scale made it look as though they were doing better when they were fasting, but the reality is they were doing worse. They would have lost more body fat if they had kept eating. They would have lost more body fat eating more calories. Right? Short-term fasting can interfere with body fat loss, not accelerate it, and you see the same thing with the keto diet. Body fat loss actually slows down when you switch to a ketogenic diet. Just looking at the bathroom scale, though, the keto diet seems like a smashing success, losing less than a pound a week on a regular diet to, boom, 3.5 pounds in 7 days after switching to keto. But what was happening inside their bodies told a totally different story. On the ketogenic diet, their rate of body fat loss was slowed by more than half. So most of what they were losing was water, but they were also losing protein. They were also losing lean mass. That may help explain why the leg muscles of CrossFit trainees placed on a ketogenic diet can shrink as much as 8% within 2 months. Of course, even if keto diets work, the point of weight loss is not to fit into a skinnier casket. Right? People whose diets even tend to trend that way appear to significantly shorten their lives. On the other hand, even just drifting in the direction of eating more healthy plant foods is associated with living longer, right? Those going the other way, though, those who start out more plant-based but then add meat to their diet at least once a week, not only appear to double or triple their odds of diabetes, stroke, heart disease, and weight gain, but may also suffer an associated 3.6-year drop in life expectancy. That's going from no meat to just once a week meat or more. Low-carb diets have been shown to impair artery function and worsen heart disease, whereas whole food plant-based diets have been shown to actually reverse heart disease. That's what Ornish used, right? So it appears to be the most effective weight loss diet, just so happens to be the only diet ever proven to reverse heart disease in the majority of patients, right? My grandma didn't have to die like that. Yeah, no one's grandma has to die like that. If that's all a plant-based diet could do, reverse the #1 killer of men and women, shouldn't that be the default diet until proven otherwise? And the fact that it can also be so effective in treating, arresting, or reversing other leading killers like type 2 diabetes and high blood pressure would seem to make the case for plant-based eating simply overwhelming. Only one diet has ever been shown to do all that, a diet centered around whole plant foods. You don't have to mortgage your health to lose weight. The single healthiest diet also appears to be the most effective diet for weight loss. After all, permanent weight loss requires permanent dietary change. I mean, healthier habits just have to become a way of life. And if it's going to be lifelong, you want it to lead to a long life. Thankfully, the single best diet proven for weight loss may just so happen to be the safest, cheapest way to eat for the longest, healthiest life. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you very much for joining us up to this point. I would like to now introduce live our very esteemed guests, and I'd like to do it in this manner. I am a firm believer that each of us is defined by 3 things. We are defined by what we eat, we are defined by what we do, and we are defined by what we say. So the person who created the concept of the Daily Dozen to help keep us healthy and created the phenomenal nutritionfacts.org to help everyone become healthy and stay that way, and who said the following: we should all be eating fruits and vegetables as if our life depends on it, because it does. The most ethical diet just so happens to be the most environmentally sound diet, and it just so happens to be the healthiest. You heard him say it just a second ago. If that's all a healthy plant-based diet could do, is reverse the #1 killer of men and women, shouldn't that be the default diet until proven otherwise? And lastly, ironically, the side effects of eating healthy can be not to have to take drugs. Let me now introduce the person who embodies all 3 of the attributes that define us, Dr. Michael Greger.
So
Hi, Dr.
glad
Greger.
to be here. Can you hear me okay? How's the sound on your end?
Sounds great.
All right, let's do this.
Well, we have a number of questions to share with you from our members, but I just want you to know how pleased everyone is that you are here. And we're all getting a kick out of you. You're actually working out while you're doing this question and answer.
The question is, why aren't you on your treadmill?
That's a very good one. And I'll have to think about that for at least for a minute. Now, when we do this Q&A, sir, Judy Cody will be asking you a number of questions, but I wanted to start with one specific one. We have all had, most all of us are members of your wonderful nutritionfacts.org. And I want to tell you, in setting all this up with Katie Schloer, she does a great job for you. She was very, very helpful.
Thank you. I appreciate that feedback. Yeah, she's great. We're lucky to have her.
Well, as luck would have it, I spend a good deal of time on YouTube looking at your videos and the videos of our other headline speakers. But one of the things I like about YouTube, which they probably learned from Amazon, is if you're looking at things that one person is talking about, you can see some others. So I happened to end up looking at a most amazing interview that you did. I believe it was with Brian Rose, and it was called of London Real.
Oh, right,
Essentially, it was called how my mother overcame a misdiagnosis of Alzheimer's.
Yeah.
So as I watched this, and I saw 3 important factors that came out of it. what you should do when a doctor diagnoses you or a loved one with Alzheimer's, what is normal pressure hydrocephalus, and how should it be treated? And then the last one, can a vitamin B12 deficiency mimic Alzheimer's? So if you would you recap that interview and tell the audience what happened with your mother?
Yeah. So, you know, my mom's mother, I talked about in How Not to Die in the Alzheimer's chapter. She died a horrible death from Alzheimer's. Really one of the scariest diagnoses. I mean, who amongst us wouldn't rather have cancer or any of the other killer diseases than, you know, losing the ability to recognize yourself or loved ones. So when my mother, my dearest mother, who I dedicated How Not to Diet to, which was what this presentation was about, when she started suffering memory problems, I mean, it was just devastating for the family. And we just assumed, well, here we go again. This is what happened to her mother. And we were just looking forward to years of incessant progressive decline in cognitive function. My mother always I mean, her whole life was built around her intellect. She was a double major in English and chemistry, and all she does is read. And I mean, that's her whole life. And so to have her start losing her faculties, it was really devastating for everyone. You know, the problem with Alzheimer's, and this happens with a number of diseases, is that there are so-called clinical diagnoses, meaning you diagnose it based on basically how the person looks and acts. There's no kind of objective way to diagnose this disease except on autopsy. So retrospectively, you can get a piece of brain tissue and say, oh, this person definitively died of Alzheimer's. But there's yet no pre-mortem diagnosis. And so when you get a diagnosis with something like Alzheimer's, for which one can never be sure, you need to rule out any and all reversible causes that can mimic Alzheimer's disease, right? I mean, if it is some invariably fatal dementia, whether it's Alzheimer's disease or Lewy body disease, or there's a whole bunch of neurodegenerative diseases. They're all horrible. They all just get worse, worse, worse till you die. And so in a certain sense, it's like, well, who cares what the name is? We all know what happens. But there are very few causes of neurodegenerative disease that are completely reversible. One of which is vitamin B12 deficiency, simple vitamin. And so as part of any dementia workup, I don't care how perfect a picture the person presents of Alzheimer's, anyone with any symptoms of dementia, cognitive decline, must get tested for B12 deficiency. Doctors are unfamiliar often with this syndrome, and so they use the wrong test. They use a serum B12 level, a blood level, and that's not an adequate test. What you need is something called a urine MMA level, a methylmalonic acid level, or you can also some other tests. That's probably my favorite. And so you need to rule that out. And I don't care if it's a 1 in a million chance that you have it. If you do have it, the remedy is, costs a nickel. I mean, it's like 5 cents. I mean, it's the vitamin B12 is dirt cheap, and all of a sudden you can get your brain completely back. You catch it early enough, you can all of a sudden, like the light bulb goes on, and all of a sudden you're back to completely normal. I mean, that's just, and so how many people right now are in nursing homes or in Alzheimer's units, dementia units, and declining every day, and they don't have dementia at all. I mean, they don't have some kind of organic dementia. They just have vitamin B12 deficiency. And so it's really scandalous that we don't test. And the other easily reversible syndrome that can look just like Alzheimer's is what's called normal pressure hydrocephalus, which means that the normally cerebral spinal fluid, the fluid surrounding your brain that cushions your brain, is created, goes up and down the spinal cord and around the brain, and created then absorbed. And there's this nice constant flow. But if the outlet for that flow gets obstructed for whatever reason, some little debris gets caught in the little filters, little drains, all of a sudden pressure can build up. And your skull is hard. I mean, there's nowhere to go. And so the only thing that happens is your brain gets squished down as the pressure builds up. So your entire brain gets squished down. And so you have this global cognitive decline. All parts of your brain can start declining. And so you can get this cognitive decline. Can also cause gait abnormalities, difficulty walking, can also cause urinary incontinence. But again, this is something we need to test for. And what you test is a really remarkable test. What you do is you do a spinal tap. It's not a comfortable procedure. Basically, they stick a big needle in your spine and they draw off some fluid. And so basically, they're just reducing the amount of fluid. And what happens is all of a sudden, boom, they're back. And that's what happened to my mom. Here we are thinking that she had Alzheimer's. Someone stuck a needle in her back, pulled out some fluid, and all of a sudden my mom was back from not recognizing even her sons to all of a sudden complete full mental capacity. But then hour after hour, as the fluid started building back up, all of a sudden we lost her. It was like flowers of Algernon in reverse. But this was tremendous news. Because, she didn't have Alzheimer's at all. All she had was this pressure disorder. And as soon as you release the pressure from the brain function fully pumps back. So all you have to do is put a little drain in the brain, very simple procedure, and just drains off excess fluid, poof, back. And so our family was lucky enough. And look, doctors diagnosed her with Alzheimer's, wrote her off, said, get her affairs in order. And the doctor was wrong. And thank God we continued demanding for a second opinion, third opinion, until finally that we had her tested, and she didn't have Alzheimer's at all. And so we're very, very much relieved, and it's just a good lesson that if you get a diagnosis for for anything, frankly, second opinion, third opinion, I think doctors portray this air of certainty about things often that they may not actually have. And so it's always good to have some extra opinions on that. So that's the moral of the story.
Thank you very, very much for that. And I think it's a wonderful story. We have a few other questions for you. Judy?
Dr. Greger, can you hear me and see me? Hi.
I can hear you and see you perfectly. I wish I was there with you all. It's great to be here, but it would be even better if I was there.
We all agree with that.
I know, but maybe you're in a better place. Right. But it's an impressive tenacity that your family had to seek all those opinions. Kudos to that and your mom's health. We're going to go back. We're going to dive right into the cholesterol questions, which your video did touch upon, but what particular foods, what specific foods could someone take to lower their total cholesterol and LDL? And how long would it take to see a change in those values?
Well, that's one of the most important questions there is, because LDL cholesterol, that bad cholesterol, it's a prime risk factor for the #1 killer of men and women. #1 reason you and all your loved ones are going to die. That's what is your LDL cholesterol? And we need to bring it down. So the first thing we do is we get rid of everything that's increasing it, that's actively pulling it up. And so that's three things. One is saturated fat, which is found in meat, dairy, and junk. One is trans fats, which is found in partially hydrogenated oil junk food, but it's been removed from the diet, which is good by federal law. And number 3 is dietary cholesterol, found predominantly in egg yolks, also found in seafood and a few other places. So those 3 things. So the first thing, you go on a diet centered around whole plant foods, cutting down meat, eggs, dairy, and junk. And for most people, that will take your cholesterol into the perfect. The average cholesterol of people that eat a plant-based diet is right around 145, 148, a total cholesterol, which is perfect, and an LDL of 68, perfect. Okay, but it's a bell curve, right? So some people are even better. We'd like to have an LDL under 70. So some people are better. So some people are worse, just depending on their genetics. They can go on the exact same diet and still their cholesterol is too high. And so then we go to the next thing. Okay, so we've already removed everything that's increasing, that's artificially increasing your cholesterol. The next step is to add things to your diet that actively pull cholesterol from your body. And so if after cutting out all the stuff that's increasing it, you're still not where you need to be, then you would go on Dr. David Jenkins' portfolio diet. This is a famous researcher at the University of Toronto. He's the one that invented the glycemic index. He discovered that there was all these different foods that lowered your cholesterol, but they each did it through a different mechanism. So he's like, wait a second, let's put a portfolio of different cholesterol lowering foods together, and so they can each add on to one another and pull your cholesterol down. He's put it to the test. And so the portfolio of foods is a whole list of them, but includes soluble fiber-rich foods, which are slimy foods like oatmeal, okra, eggplant, pulls your cholesterol down. Nuts, pull your cholesterol down. Soy foods, pull your cholesterol down. There's a whole, you go through the whole, and so it's a whole food plant-based diet, plus it's particular plants you want to add on top. And it pulls cholesterol down as much as statin drugs within 2 weeks. So we're talking 20, 30% drop in LDL cholesterol within 2 weeks. That's better than drugs. Drugs take months to take an effect and have side effects, and we only have good side effects when we put people on a healthy diet. So that's what I would recommend. Now, most people don't have to worry about eating specific foods. They don't have to, choose, one vegetable over another. But if you're having problems getting your cholesterol down, then there are certain foods that can help.
Thank you. To go along with that cholesterol venue, there's another question. Dr. Greger, a couple of years ago, you put out a fascinating video on the impact of a small test for Brazil nuts and how eating 4 Brazil nuts at 1 time per month could have extraordinary results on lowering your cholesterol, even a month later. So what happened? Any follow-up to that test? And if none were done, why not?
Yeah, no, it's a great study. So this great, the findings were really remarkable. So right, they had people eat 4 Brazil nuts once, not every day. In fact, you couldn't do it every day. That's too much selenium, actually. So just 4 once a month had this remarkable month-long effect on lowering cholesterol. And in fact, the results were too good. It's like, oh my God, we've got to repeat this. It's just like, this is remarkable. I don't even know how that would happen, how that would work. It's never been repeated. So they've never done it again, which just shows you where the money is, right? There's no like big nut out there that's you'd think the Brazil nut companies would, I don't know, fund a study or something. But so that's where we're left with this small study saying these remarkable results. And so basically what I tell people is, look, well, what's the worst that can happen? It's 4 nuts once a month. Go for it. Try it. See what happens. You tell me. Get your cholesterol tested before and after, and you tell me if it works. It's certainly not going to hurt anybody. It's just, when my colleagues see me make that kind of recommendation, they say, wait a second, you are changing your clinical practice, changing your recommendations based on one single study. That's not good. That's not right. Now, I understand that mindset. That's actually a good mindset to have, because normally when doctors make recommendations, they're recommending pills and surgical procedures, pills and procedures. Now, and drugs, prescription drugs, kill over 100,000 Americans every year. That's not like mistakes or overdosing this is just drugs as prescribed. The side effects is they killed over 100,000 people. It's like one of the leading causes of death. So, oh my God, you want to have this massive mountain of evidence proving that a drug, a potentially deadly drug, actually has more benefits than risks. So yeah, one study ain't gonna do it. You need a massive amount, right? To justify taking the risks. But when there's no risks, you know, unless you have a Brazil nut allergy, obviously. I mean, but if there's no risk, what's the downside, right? So I like their thinking. We want evidence when there's lots of risk. But when there's no risk, the bar for evidence is really low. It's like, hey, give it a try. It's cheap, simple, convenient. Hey, maybe it won't work. Maybe it was a total fluke. Maybe it was data fraud. Maybe they made it up. Maybe they never did the study. Who knows? Right? But it's like, it can't hurt. Give it a try.
Good answer. Thank you. Our next is in the weight loss, weight gain area. This person asks, how do you answer a person who says, I'm already too thin, and I'm worried that if I convert to a plant-based diet, I'll lose additional weight, which I don't want to do. So the real question is there a specific prescription of plant-based foods that this person should be eating to help put on weight for them?
Well, so if you have insufficient body fat, then yeah, indeed, you can just eat calorie-dense foods. And I talked about calorie density in the presentation. So there are some, not many, but there are some plant foods that are rich in calories, like nuts, seeds, nut butters, seed butters, avocados, dried fruit. So like trail mix, right? Nuts and dried fruit. You can snack throughout the day, and you can put on as many calories as you need. But I think typically the concern with growing older and losing weight is not so much you don't have enough fat, is that you're actually losing muscle, something called sarcopenia. As we age, we lose muscle. That has to do with resistance exercise. That's not your diet. There's no magic muscle pill or protein powder or any of that. Your body is not going to keep your muscle around if you're not going to use it. It's use it or lose it. It's like if you have your arm in a cast and you lose all your muscle. Why? Because your body, it takes a lot of energy to make muscle. Why am I doing this? I got other things better to do with my, protein and energy. And so it just, but all of a sudden you start using that muscle again and all this. So that's what we have to do. We have to do resistance exercise, and it could be bands. I mean, it doesn't have to be weightlifting, but there's all sorts of ways we can kind of, stress our muscles so that they'll continue to keep them bulked up. So that's the most critical thing we can do to maintain muscle mass is resistance exercise. In addition to aerobic exercise, getting our heart rate up, because that's really the most important muscle in our body.
This one says, this member has been eating whole food plant-based over a year. In the last 8 pounds are very slow to come off. How would you recommend breaking through that plateau? Will that just, the last bit, eventually go away?
Well, that's really the second half of my book. So how not to diet. The first half I talk about eating whole food plant-based as really the centerpiece of healthy weight loss. And then the second half of the book, I said, look, well, for people that, are not losing weight as fast as they'd like, or they reach some plateau, what are some additional things you can do regardless of what you eat the rest of the time to further weight loss? And that's where I talk about black cumin and vinegar and all these other little tips and tweaks that pull down. And so that's what I would concentrate on. In fact, it's actually in my new app. My old app, Dr. Greger's Daily Dozen, has been updated. It's a free app on iPhone, Android, iPad, where you can switch over into weight loss mode. And now you see the 21 tweaks from the How Not to Diet book. And you can check through those as well. And so so I would recommend that. And looking very much forward to coming back and presenting my next book, which will be out December 2022, How Not to Age, talking about longevity.
Very nice. Very nice. I have a gentleman's question. And he said that he's lost a good amount of weight, but that persistent belly fat remains. Any suggestions?
Well, I mean, there's two kinds of belly fat. There's what's called subcutaneous belly fat. That's the belly fat on the outside that jiggles in the mirror. And then there's the internal visceral belly fat beneath the muscle layer in your stomach, coiled around your internal organs, infiltrating your internal organs. That's the really dangerous type of fat, the metabolically active type of fat. And so having excess subcutaneous fat, the jiggly fat on your arms or something, really has no kind of metabolic problem associated. And they've done studies where they did massive liposuctions on people, like took literally 20 pounds of fat off of people. But all that fat was just subcutaneous, under the skin fat, and they had no benefits. In terms of better blood sugars or better triglycerides, all the things that come along with losing weight, because they just lost the wrong kind of weight. They lost that subcutaneous fat. And when you lose weight naturally, your body first goes after that visceral fat. Your body knows that's the most dangerous fat, goes after it first. And so if that's the kind of fat we're talking about, then weight loss by any means will get that visceral belly fat down. And I would worry less about the subQ fat.
Thank you. Our next one is a little in a different venue. What in the plant-based world could a person eat that will help them overcome depression?
Oh, I've got a bunch of videos on that. If you go to nutritionfacts.org, I have a series of videos talking about mental illness, depression in particular. And so basically they did, they've randomized people, this is done at the University of Arizona, randomized people to remove meat and eggs and fish from people's diet, significant improvement in mood within 2 weeks. And so we know switching to a plant-based diet, we think it's this, what's called arachidonic acid, this long-chain pro-inflammatory omega-6 fatty acid found particularly in chicken and eggs, but through all animal products. But by cutting out chicken, other meat, cutting out eggs, significant improvement in mood within 2 weeks. We think it's because there's less neuroinflammation, less brain inflammation. We say, wait a second, what if I'm already eating a plant-based diet and still want to improve my mood beyond that? The only interventional studies, there's lots of observational studies where people eating particular foods seem to have better moods, but it's hard to tell which came first. You have to prove it with an interventional trial where you split people up into two groups and see if one group does better on a different diet. And the only study in terms of improving mood, there's a couple of different foods that have been shown to improve anxiety and other things, but in terms of elevating mood, fruit and vegetable quantity. So the study, it was really high. I think it was 11 servings of fruits and vegetables a day. The minimum is the federal guidelines are for 9 every day. No longer is it 5 every day. 9 to 13 is a recommended intake of fruits and vegetables. So it's really basically telling people not to eat a lot of fruits and vegetables, just the recommended minimum fruits and vegetables. Saw a significant improvement in mood, and it was within a day. Like they felt better the next day. So that's really remarkable. But lots of fruits and vegetables. And so every meal has to be packed with fruits and vegetables, and you see significant improvement in mood.
Okay, thank you. Here's another one. I once asked your thoughts on using coconut oil as a skin moisturizer, and your remark was, no way, or something to that effect. Yet now recently I've heard you mentioning coconut oil on a YouTube video that has analgesic or pain relieving properties for aching joints when applied topically. Please tell us the science behind your differing stance regarding topical use of this oil. Can it now be, advantageous as a moisturizer as well?
Topical use is and has always been fine, with one exception, that's infants. The skin of infants is so thin that when you apply coconut oil on their skin, you actually get a spike in saturated fats in their blood. So the coconut oil actually absorbs through their skin into their bloodstream. But after infancy, your skin is an impenetrable barrier, and you can slather on all the, it's Crisco you want, you name that, you could slather lard on, and you're not going to hurt, and you're not going to raise your cholesterol at all because it doesn't get absorbed. And so coconut oil is fine on your hair, on your face, and your skin, as long as it doesn't go in your mouth.
So there's no truth about helping in any kind of joint pain or achiness?
Oh, well, so topically, the oil found to be most pain reducing has been extra virgin olive oil. So applying extra virgin olive oil outside the body topically has been shown to decrease pain from osteoarthritis, which is the arthritis typically of the knees. They found that rubbing with extra virgin olive oil compared to other oils, or compared to rubbing without oil, a significant improvement in pain and function too.
Thank you. Thank you. In your book, How Not to Die, you mentioned the Indian gooseberry alma as one of the most potent antioxidants to ingest. Do you still believe this, and how can one use this in their daily meal plans?
Yeah, amla is really remarkable. So it's this, it's a whole food. It's just a fruit grown in many parts of the world. And so it's just dried and powdered fruit. But it's a really good question. Wait a second, I don't care how good it is for me. How do you actually eat it? And it really is good, and lowers cholesterol, lowers blood sugars, all sorts of really beneficial things. But it tastes very bad. It's sour, astringent, bitter. It's inedible. So the only way I've been able to include it in my diet is put it in a smoothie. So if you put a smoothie with lots of fruits and vegetables, you can blend it up and you're not going to taste it. So you kind of disguise it. I'm sure there's other things you could do that which are very powerfully flavored and you might not taste it. And the only other way is to take it in like a capsule or something. Some people just put it in water and chug it down and just suffer through it. Which, I mean, yeah, you could do that like once, but you got to do it every day. Otherwise, right? And so, I don't know. You're a stronger person than I if you can hack that. So you can put it in capsules. You can actually buy it in capsules. Not the extract. You just want whole powdered fruit, one ingredient. That's it. No fillers, no nothing. If you can't find it, you can make your own. You can get a bag of the powder and you put it in capsules yourself and take it. But I don't know. Yeah. But the people that like just drinking water, nasty.
It is bitter. I know. Even in oatmeal.
Woo.
My next question for you is, I would like to hear what Dr. Greger thinks about taking alpha lipoic acid supplements. In addition to the benefits and lack of side effects noted in a recent article, I understand that some longevity researchers have begun taking it. And what do you think about alpha lipoic acid supplements?
That's a great question, and that is an answer that I will seek out in my How Not to Age book, right? Since it is, people take it for longevity, and I will get to the bottom of it and find out what the benefits, if any, and risks, if any, there are.
Okay, that's coming up then. Our next question is, there are many brands of vitamins on the market, and when this person goes to the pharmacy, they have no idea what manufacturer to trust or the quality or accuracy of the labeling. Can Dr. Greger recommend one or two vitamin manufacturers that are above reproach? This person currently takes vitamin D3, 2,000 units, 500 mcgs of B12, and 600 milligrams a day of calcium. I'm eating a whole food plant-based diet, and my present brand of vitamins are from Spring Valley. Also, what is his opinion on my taking the above mentioned vitamins and the dosage?
So it's a great question because the supplement industry is so poorly regulated that oftentimes what's in the pill is not actually what's on the label. You're getting a different amount or you're getting a completely different substance altogether. And so that's frustrating. Wait a second, you're paying for one thing, getting something else, which could be harmless or worse. And so my recommendation would be to go out of your way to purchase supplements that have a USP certification. There'll be a big circle, say USP, and that's a third-party, independent testing company. What they do is they test supplements. Supplement makers pay them to test their supplements randomly, and see if it matches the label. And so then, if it does, they can put USP on the bottle. So now they're not saying that it's good for you or that you should take it. It's just saying that what's in the pill is what's on the bottle. And so just because it says USP doesn't mean you should take it. It doesn't mean it's good for you, but it just tells you that you're getting what you're paying for. And that's what you want. So vitamin D, if you're getting insufficient sun, then 2,000 international units once a day of D3 would be a good idea. I forget, is that where this person was?
Yes, 2,000 units
Excellent.
and
Okay.
600 milligrams of calcium.
Okay, now and
600
B12,
milligrams of calcium.
B12, critically important for anyone over age 50, period. That's the Institute of Medicine recommendations. Everyone over 50, I don't care what you eat, meat, no meat, doesn't matter, you have to take B12. What's the amount of B12 you should take? If you take it every day, if you're over once you get over a certain age, you need to take 1,000 micrograms once a day. So it sounds like this person was taking 500, or they really
daily.
Should be taking 1,000 micrograms once a day of cyanocobalamin. So if you have 500, just double it. Just take 2 every day. And there's many different kinds in the market. You want the one called cyanocobalamin as opposed to methyl or adenyl or, okay. And then the third thing, calcium. I would recommend you watch my videos on calcium supplementation. I think once you do, you will decide to not take your calcium, because unfortunately it thickens the blood when you take these high spiking doses of calcium, and can increase your risk of cardiovascular disease. So we should get calcium from the healthiest source, which is dark green leafy vegetables. We're called low oxalate dark green leafy vegetables. So that's all the greens, with the exception of spinach, Swiss chard, and beet greens. Those are great greens. They're stingy with their calcium, but all the other greens, arugula and kale and collards, that's really the best source, healthiest source of calcium. Has all sorts of side benefits as well.
And that's still your recommendation, Dr. Greger, even though somebody has osteopenia or low bone density issues? To eat more greens and not.
The most important thing you can do, it's the same thing with muscle wasting. This is bone wasting. Why is your body bone wasting? Because you're not putting enough stress on your bones. Weight-bearing exercise, critically important to maintain bone health. So I don't even want to hear questions about diet until you're exercising, weight-bearing exercise an hour a day, every day, 7 days a week. Okay, then we can talk about diet. Then we can talk about other things we can do. Yes, you have to have sufficient calcium, sufficient vitamin D, and a number of other things. But the most important thing to do is put that light stress on your bones, like just walking. That's weight-bearing exercise. So walking an hour a day. So that's like walking 2 miles and back, right, in an hour. So people walk about 4 miles an hour, and so back and forth. So you walk 2 miles and then come on back every day, and then your skeleton your body will realize, oh my God, there's all this stress on my bones. Quick, I better make a strong skeleton. It starts depositing calcium in your bones. But if you're sitting around the couch all day, doesn't matter how much calcium you take, your body's gonna be like, well, I don't need to waste this on a skeleton. You're not even using it, right? We were built to move. So yeah, that's the most important thing we can do is weight-bearing exercise.
Thank you. I think we have a couple more that we can get through. Someone says that there's a doctor on the internet who's always posting about what one should eat and what one shouldn't eat. He says tomatoes are bad because they contain lectins. My question is, does Dr. Greger agree with this?
Yes, that doctor is a Dr. Gundry. He wrote a book called The Plant Paradox, and I have a video addressing that very topic. And I think, believe the name of the video is Dr. Gundry is Wrong. It's the name of the video. So you can look up lectins, you can look up plant paradox, you can look up Gundry on nutritionfacts.org, pull up my video. And I just go through, and the claims don't make any sense. So the most lectin-rich foods, so he has this idea in his head that lectins are bad, but the most lectin-rich foods on the planet, like beans, legumes, beans, split peas, chickpeas, and lentils, are one of the key predictor of dietary survival. I mean, that's what all the blue zones eat. You know, the people who live over 100, live long, active, healthy lives, the longest living populations on the planet. What do they all share in common? Not only do they eat plant-centered diets in general, but specifically as their main source of protein, one of the legumes, whether it's brown beans or soybeans in Okinawa or anywhere else. So wait a second. This is the food associated with the greatest longevity. Well, then lectins make no sense. And I go through, and actually some lectins are actually good for you, and I go deep into the lectin issue. Yes, believe I strongly disagree, and I think the science does too.
Thank you for that answer. And maybe our last question for the evening is, we've been told that fermented foods like sauerkraut, kimchi, and miso are healthy for our gut biomes. But there are others who have expressed concern that the histamines in these fermented foods can be significant contributors to inflammation. What are Dr. Greger's thoughts on that?
My biggest concern about fermented foods is the salt content. So the way you ferment something like cabbage into sauerkraut, you always used to think that they added some kind of starter or something, but no, those lactic acid producing bacteria actually present on cabbage leaves out in the field. And all you have to do is take cabbage, put it in salt water, and the salt prevents the growth of all the bad bacteria, and poof, the good bacteria, which are salt resistant, go crazy, and they produce all that lactic acid, and you have sauerkraut. But the problem is you aren't able to do that without massive amounts of salt. So if you are going to do sauerkraut, you have got to rinse that like crazy under running water, get rid of any excess salt, and you're still going to be too salty. We really want to get under 1,500 milligrams of salt a day, according to the American Heart Association. That's almost impossible if you're eating foods like sauerkraut, olives, things like that. Now, a little bit's fine. You can still stay under 1,500, but I would not make it, I would not eat a lot of those foods. Now, there is some fermentation that doesn't require salt. So, for example, tempeh, which is a fermented soybean product, is actually fermented a different way, doesn't require salt. But that would be my biggest concern. And one doesn't need to worry. And so, but I think what this questioner is getting at is, well, wait a second, what about all the good bacteria in these fermented foods? Aren't those good for you? They act as probiotics. But as I said, those probiotics, those good bacteria, are present on the raw fruits and vegetables. That's how they get in the sauerkraut. They're on the cabbage leaves. And so you can eat the cabbage. You can have some coleslaw. You get all those probiotics without getting the salt.
Right, and especially if you're salt sensitive or have high blood pressure issues, you probably want to not do too much of the fermented foods.
And you know, even I'm glad you mentioned that. There's this concept, there's this salt sensitivity. Some people have salt sensitive blood pressures and some people don't. Some people take salt and their blood pressures go up. Some people take salt and their blood pressure doesn't change. And so those people think, oh, I don't have to worry about restricting salt, but that's not true, because high blood pressure is not the only bad thing salt does. It does a lot of other bad things, decreasing artery function, such that increased salt intake, even in people who are salt insensitive, still suffer increased mortality rates with higher salt. So everyone has to cut down on salt, whether or not it affects your blood pressure, because it affects your kidney function and some other things. And so, yeah, it's critical not to add salt at the table, in the kitchen, and try to cut out as many processed foods as possible, because anything in a box and bag typically has salt added as a flavor enhancer.
Oh, I think we've come to the end of our questions, Dr. Greger. Thank you so very much. And I'm going to turn the meeting over back to Ross.
Thank you so much, Judy.
Dr. Greger, I also want to echo what Judy said. You are an amazing individual. and I'm curious about a couple of things. When you talk about nutritionfacts.org, would you tell our audience, from a people's point of view, how many volunteers do you have that can read, I think if I remember correctly, at least 100 medical studies per day and keep up with it? That allows you to put out all the videos and everything else that you do. Tell us just a bit.
No, so we are largely a volunteer-driven organization. It changes. We do quarterly reports. I believe the last quarter, 179 active volunteers. And having said that, look, if someone wants to volunteer out there, we have a lot of kind of retired medical professionals that just want to continue to give back. And we could certainly use your help. I mean, the literature just gets bigger and bigger. More and more studies are published every year. So it's really difficult to stay on top of it. And the only way we can do that is just have dozens of people churning every single day through these studies to pick out the ones to do videos on. And so I am very appreciative. We do have a staff of 14 paid folks, but that is dwarfed. There's no way we can do what we do without our wonderful volunteers.
I want to thank you for all the time that you spent with us, and I want to thank our members for all the time that you've given us as well tonight. Dr. Greger, thank you for being you. We appreciate everything that you do, and we can't wait for How Not to Age.
Oh, I hope it'll. I'm setting my sights high. I hope it'll be as good as all this tantalizing new research out there. I do have a new cookbook coming out in December, just in a few months, the How Not to Diet cookbook. So at least there'll be some good recipes to tide people over while I get back into the research.
Doctor, thank you so much, and good evening to everyone.
Looking forward to coming back and being there in person.
We are too. Thank you, sir. Good night, everyone.